What's the first key tenet of MMT? Monetary sovereignty. A country that issues its own currency, US dollar, UK pound, it can't go bankrupt in its own currency. It can always create more money to pay domestic debts. Now, my response to that is, okay, yes, but in doing so that you're debasing the money itself. Add to that the Cantillon effect, which basically says that the closer you are to the money creation, the better you off are as a result of it, which is why wherever you inject this money, so in the current system, money is created basically the nexus between government and the financial services, and that's why government and financial services continue to grow, but wages are a long way down the list of who gets new money when it flows into the system. Therefore, wages always lag the growth in government and financial services, which as a result means that, it used to be that your granddad could buy a 4-bed home and support a family and a stay-at-home wife, whereas you cannot even afford yourself, let alone children. So I take issue with that. The other thing I would point out on this one is that promises made by governments to their people, they're not just monetary, okay? They are the promises are much more like, we promise the provision of national security, healthcare goods and services, roads you can actually drive on. And yes, these are priced in money, but only in a functional system. If you go down the route of just creating money to solve your problems, you're not actually getting any more national defence or healthcare goods and services or roads to drive on. You're just getting new money. And you can rapidly find yourself in this situation, which I think we are in very much at the moment, where there's plenty of money swashing around, but a absence of things. And this is a phenomenon I've asked a whole bunch of, reasonably wealthy guests that I've had on Brokenomics, say to them, well, look, we might be in this situation where we've got lots of money, but you try getting some building work done. Try and find a builder. And even if you do get one, you're then waiting interminably on building supplies. So there's plenty of money. And if you're interested in buying financial assets, you can always deploy it. If you want to buy digital services, if you want to load up on all sorts of digital subscriptions, you're perfectly able to do this. If you want to buy plastic tap from China, you can rapidly exhaust a small fortune if you're a dedicated aficionado of Amazon and plastic tat. But in terms of real world things that we ultimately actually value, well, you quickly find that there is a shortage of the ability to get hold of any of these things, and I don't think that the money solves all of that. But anyway, moving on. Next key tenet of MMT, which is the spending comes before the taxes. So according to MMT, government spends, injects the money into the economy, and then taxing removes some of that money. So in this sense, the government doesn't need to tax revenue in order to spend. Rather, the taxes are there effectively as a way to manage inflation and demand, and also to create the demand for the money in the first place. My response on that would be that a tax system that needs to respond to movements in liquidity to manage the price level and aggregate demand would be unworkable. It would appear very sort of arbitrary and chaotic. However, of course, as we come to, MMTers have enormous faith in the government to centrally plan this type of stuff, which I do not think holds up by any example ever. What else do they say? Third key tenet of MMT. They will say that deficits are not inherently bad. Budget deficits are simply surpluses for the private sector. That if the government spends more than it taxes, the money ends up in private hands, becomes their savings. And MMT sees deficits as basically a tool to support demand and unemployment. So that might sound a bit abstract by itself, but if you go back to the Buckaroo example, you see what I mean. Their deficit was whatever, a couple of hundred buckaroos at the end of the academic year, and for them, for the purists, that simply isn't a problem. It just means there's some buckaroos being saved up. Maybe in the next academic year they can sell them to the students who find themselves with a fresh liability of number of buckaroos to turn in by the end of the academic year. So deficits not being inherently bad. The way I look at this is that employment itself is not a good in of itself. Productivity and innovation, those are what's ultimately good, and that jobs are downstream of supporting that goal. So if you are doing something productive, well, then that's when you hire people so that you can do more of that thing. If you've come across some great innovation and you want to apply that thing, well, that's where you bring in jobs. But you have to look at it as a chain, starting with productivity and innovation, then the jobs, then the benefits that come through. Whereas I think what MMTs do is they just chop off the first part. They've got their horse blinkers on, where they're just not seeing the full. They're starting from employment good. Let's do more of that. Further, I'd point out is that demand, in my worldview, certainly demand is pointless. I mean, demand is infinite, basically. You know, I have demand for a mansion and a private jet and a yacht. What I lack is the productivity that would mean that I can afford that. I am currently not in a position where I am so productive and churning out so much value or innovating at such speed that the value of that is such that people want to pay me enough that I can go out and buy a mansion and a super yacht and have a private jet. But I do demand those things. I just lack the productivity. Whereas M&Ters, like, you know, many on the left will say, oh, no, we need to go out and we need to generate demand, as if demand is not, as I say, already infinite, already well beyond. Supply of productive value is the problem, in my view, not the fact that people aren't demanding enough stuff. I mean, they would look at it slightly different and say, okay, well, yeah, but we mean demand as in supplying people with money, but same bloody difference. It gets you to the same place. Right, fourth key tenet of modern monetary theory, which is full employment as the goal. So they advocate government spending to ensure full employment, even proposing a job guarantee program as a sort of buffer stock for labour, like central banks use interest rates to manage inflation. In addition to what I said for the last point, I would just say, well, look, if it's job creation that you're going for, you know, why not just have everybody? Why not just have half the population dig a hole and the other half fill it in? You know, it doesn't add anything useful. And I think MMT have lost sight of why jobs were created in the first place. They are part of a chain of value, of which a job is simply part of that value chain. It's not value in of itself, and you've just got to take a bigger picture view of this.
If you would like to see the full version of this premium video, please head over to lotuseaters.com and subscribe to gain full access to all of our premium content.